There was a humming sound in my ears, almost like static, by the time she finished her third sentence. That's how I knew my body had gone into some kind of shock. People were clapping, laughing, sipping wine, and I was just standing there, alone, in a room full of people who thought I was in on the joke. I wasn't. My name's Milton. Yeah, I know, not the flashiest name in the world. I'm 41. Used to teach high school literature until my nerves gave out. Now I manage inventory at a regional hardware distributor. It's not sexy, but it pays the mortgage. My wife, well, again, that word feels radioactive now. Her name is Charmaine. She's 38. She owns a boutique bakery with a ridiculous waiting list and more Instagram followers than most minor celebrities. She's beautiful in the way people like to post about, you know? Filter perfect. Always curated. Always on. We were at my niece's birthday party. A small gathering at a rented barn-style venue outside of town. Rustic lighting. Acoustic guitar guy in the corner. Pizza on wooden slabs. Charmaine brought cupcakes, naturally. They had edible glitter on them. I remember being in the middle of pouring lemonade for my niece when I heard the DJ announce, "Hey everyone, Charmaine wants to say a few words." I looked up and saw her walking to the center with a wireless mic, her other hand wrapped around a glass of rose. She looked straight at me as she stepped up to the front of the room, and I thought, for one fragile second, that she was going to say something sweet. Maybe something about us. She smiled, then tilted her head and said into the mic, "You ever love someone so much that you have to lie to them every day just to keep the peace?" The room chuckled. They thought it was stand-up. I thought my heart cracked a little right then. She kept going. Like, you ever smile and say, "I'm just working late," when really you're across town at a rooftop bar, sipping dirty martinis with someone who doesn't ask about your Etsy habit or leave wet towels on the floor? Laughter again. Bigger this time. People thought it was some kind of edgy comedy bit. And I just stood there, frozen with a paper cup of lemonade in one hand and a napkin that said, "You're the sweetest," in the other. My niece was tugging at my shirt, asking me why her balloon was flying away, and I couldn't even move. Charmaine laughed into the mic. I mean, I'm not saying I've done that, but I'm also not saying I haven't. Then she looked right at me, like, burned through me with her eyes. That's when I realized this wasn't a joke. Not even a little. This was a confession cleverly disguised as a performance, wrapped in cake frosting and party favors. And I was the only one who understood the punchline. People clapped. The DJ played something upbeat. The party moved on like nothing had happened. I stood there for a long time, blinking, replaying her words over and over like some broken movie reel. She didn't come up to me after. Didn't offer an explanation or apology. Just handed me the car keys and said, "I'll call you later." And she did. 2 hours later. I picked up. My voice cracked when I answered. She exhaled into the phone like she'd just run a marathon and said, with a hint of smug affection, "You know I love you, right?" That's how the whole thing started unraveling. And trust me, that was just the prelude. That night, I didn't sleep. I lay on the couch, still in the same clothes, trying to make sense of what happened. The call echoed in my head. "You know I love you, right?" It was so casual, so careless, like she hadn't just set fire to 11 years of our life in front of dozens of people with a microphone in hand. I didn't respond. I just hung up. The next morning, I got a text from her that said, "Let's not overthink this. It was just a party." Just a party? Is that what you call it when you use a child's birthday celebration as a stage for your private betrayal? I still wasn't sure if she had actually slept with someone, or if it was all just suggestive sarcasm meant to provoke me. Either way, she had everyone fooled. My brother called later and said, "Man, Charmaine's speech was hilarious. You guys are so real with each other. It's refreshing." He had no idea. None of them did. To them, it was all performance art. I wanted to scream. Instead, I did what I always do. I blamed myself. Maybe I had stopped being exciting. Maybe I was too predictable. Maybe she needed more than what I was able to give. Later that day, I checked her Instagram. The first photo I saw was from the party. She had her arm around a guy I didn't recognize, tall, sharp haircut, dark green shirt. She tagged him in the photo with the caption, "This one always makes me laugh too hard. Skull speech balloon cocktail glass." My stomach turned. I clicked his profile. He was a photographer. One of those smooth types with thousands of followers, always in someone's rooftop shot or studio shoot. She'd mentioned him before, Cam from work. I just never put it together. But now I was starting to. And still, I didn't confront her. Instead, I spent that whole evening rewatching a video clip someone had posted from the party. In it, Charmaine was laughing, twirling the mic cord, and saying that line again about lying to keep the peace. The camera panned to the guests, laughing, nodding, enjoying the show. I was just outside the frame. Invisible. Irrelevant. That's when something in me cracked, not in an explosive way, but in a slow, hollow kind of way. Like a chair leg giving out under someone who's been sitting still too long. That night, I packed a small bag. I didn't leave the house yet, but I folded up a few essentials. Not to run away, just to prepare. For what exactly, I wasn't sure. But I had the overwhelming feeling that whatever this was, it was only the beginning. 3 days passed before we sat down face to face. During those 72 hours, she texted me 6 times. Each message got shorter, colder, more passive-aggressive. The last one just said, "If you're gonna make this weird, tell me now." So I agreed to meet her at the bakery after hours. Neutral ground. She unlocked the back door and let me in like I was just another employee picking up a late check. I noticed she didn't hug me. No kiss. Not even that awkward shoulder touch people do when they're not sure where things stand. She just walked toward the prep counter and gestured for me to sit. "All right," she said, as darting to the clock like she had somewhere better to be. "You clearly want to talk. So talk." That sentence alone almost knocked the breath out of me. I had imagined so many different versions of this moment. In every one, she was remorseful, emotional, maybe even scared she'd lose me. But here she was calm, blank, and distant. So I asked her what I thought was a fair starting point. "Was what you said at the party true?" She blinked twice. Then she shrugged. "Which part?" "The part about lying to me every day, the part about someone who doesn't leave wet towels on the floor. Was that just a joke? Or was that directed at someone specific?" She took a deep breath, smiled faintly. "I mean, do you really want the answer to that?" "I need the truth, Charmaine." She rolled her eyes. "All right. Yes, it was about someone. And yes, I've been lying. But before you get dramatic, it's not like I've been having some full-blown affair." I flinched. That sentence, "not like I've been having some full-blown affair," that was when the floor beneath me shifted. I asked, "What do you mean not like? What have you been doing then?" She looked right at me and said, "Flirting. Going out. Talking. Laughing. Getting attention. You know, all the things I stopped getting at home." It hit like a punch I wasn't braced for. I didn't say anything. I just stared at her, like she might crack under the weight of her own words. But she didn't. She just leaned back against the counter, arms crossed, watching me like I was the unreasonable one. "So, Cam," I finally asked, "the guy from Instagram?" She didn't answer at first, just looked at her feet, then said, "I don't think I need to justify who I spend time with. Charmaine, we're married." She nodded, casually. "Technically." My hands started to tremble. "What happened to us? How did we go from 'we'll get through anything' to this?" Her answer came after a long pause. "You got boring, Milton. You're nice. Safe. But you disappeared years ago. You stopped being interesting. I needed to feel alive again. And if I can't get that at home, I'll find it where I can." That was the moment I knew something irreversible had broken. Not just between us, but inside me. I had spent years believing that loyalty meant something. That growing older together meant adapting, helping, forgiving. But to her, it meant slowing down, stagnating, becoming invisible. I didn't yell. I didn't throw anything. I just stood up and walked to the door. As I reached for the handle, she said behind me, "You're seriously going to walk out over this?" I turned slowly, barely able to speak. "This is the first time in years I've seen you tell the truth. And it just happened to be the one thing that made me stop loving you." She didn't call after me. And that silence? It screamed louder than anything else she ever said. I didn't go home that night. I couldn't. Not with the smell of buttercream and lies still clinging to my clothes. Instead, I checked into a tiny motel near the highway, the kind with flickering signs and a buzzing vending machine in the hallway. I didn't sleep much. Just stared at the ceiling, thinking how surreal it felt to be so alone after over a decade of building a life together. The worst part was, I hadn't told a single soul. Not my brother, not my parents, not even Darren from work, who always joked that Charmaine was too spicy for someone like me. I'd kept it all inside. Maybe out of shame. Maybe out of denial. Or maybe because part of me was still holding on to some twisted hope that she'd show up the next morning at my door, crying, begging for forgiveness. But morning came. Then afternoon. Then evening. And no one came looking. It wasn't until the following weekend, at my niece's softball game, that the questions began. My sister-in-law pulled me aside behind the bleachers and asked if everything was okay between me and Charmaine. I lied. Said she had to work. Said I wasn't feeling well. I don't know why I said that. Maybe because telling the truth would have made it all too real. Maybe because if I said it out loud, I'd have to hear how pathetic it sounded. She embarrassed you at a child's birthday party, admitted she's been lying for months, and you still didn't leave for good. Yeah, that would have been hard to swallow. But the truth has a way of clawing its way to the surface. The following Monday, someone at work forwarded me a video. It was Charmaine again. This time, she was tagged in a friend's story at some private rooftop event. Dancing, laughing. And right there, with his hand low on her back, was Cam. They looked comfortable. Too comfortable. Like people who no longer cared who saw them. What hurt the most wasn't that she was with him. It was how free she looked. Like a weight had been lifted. Like she had finally stepped into the version of herself she had been slowly molding behind my back for years. The Charmaine who didn't want a quiet house. Who didn't want rainy day puzzles or Wednesday night lasagna. She wanted noise. Applause. Excitement. She wanted an audience. I still hadn't said anything. But then it happened, something I didn't expect. My mom called me, crying. Said she'd been at the grocery store and overheard two women from church gossiping near the produce section about how Charmaine had really made a show of herself at that party. One of them mentioned my name. The other called it a cruel way to humiliate a good man. And that broke something in me. Because now it wasn't just between us. Now the whispers had started. The judgment. The pity. And I wasn't ready for that. I wasn't ready to be the guy whose wife made a joke out of him. I turned off my phone that night and sat in my car for hours. Parked in the dark outside the old library where we first met. I didn't cry. Not really. But I did whisper something out loud that no one else heard. She didn't just leave me. She erased me. And for the first time since it all began, I realized, maybe I wasn't supposed to fight for this. Maybe losing her wasn't a tragedy. Maybe it was the start of finally finding myself again. But I had no idea what was coming next. A week passed. I didn't answer her texts. I didn't go home. She didn't ask me to. That silence between us, it stretched like an old rubber band, waiting to snap. I kept going to work, putting on a neutral face, but inside I was falling apart in ways I didn't know a person could. I started writing notes to myself, on napkins, receipts, inside my phone, just to feel like my thoughts existed somewhere. One of them read, "She doesn't miss you. She misses the version of herself you made her feel safe to be." I don't know where that came from, but it felt right. Because the more I replayed everything, the clearer it became. I had been a placeholder. A cushion. Someone she could land on until something more alive came along. Then one afternoon, after my shift, I found her waiting by my car. She was sitting on the hood, arms crossed, like nothing had happened. No warning. Just there. I froze. Part of me wanted to turn around and disappear back into the building, but she saw me and smiled. Not a warm smile. Not the kind that says, "I missed you." It was more like, "I knew you wouldn't be able to stay mad forever." She slid off the hood. "Hey," she said like we were meeting for coffee. "You look tired." I didn't answer. She sighed and leaned against the door. "Okay, so, can we talk? I mean, really talk. Not walk away. Not sulk. Just talk." I should have said no. I should have kept walking. But I didn't. I stood there, watching her dig into her bag and pull out a folded piece of paper. "I wrote some things down," she said. "Stuff I've been thinking about. I know I hurt you. I know that party was okay. Look, it was a mistake. I tried to be funny. I went too far. But you know I never meant to humiliate you. I've been lost for a while. And I don't want to lose you too." I took the paper, but I didn't read it. I just stared at it. "How long were you seeing him?" She blinked. "What? Cam. How long?" She looked away. "Milton. Don't lie. Not now." There was a long pause before she finally whispered, 6 months. 6 months. That number hit like a punch to the chest. Not 6 days. Not 6 weeks. Half a year of sneaking around. Of me kissing her goodbye in the morning while she was already texting him. Of dinners where she'd pretend to be tired, while really counting down until the next excuse to disappear. I nodded slowly, feeling my stomach sink. And what was I supposed to be during those 6 months? The guy keeping the lights on while you played out your second adolescence. Her voice sharpened. "Don't do that. You don't get to act like I'm some monster. You haven't exactly been easy to live with, Milton." I laughed. Not because it was funny, but because it was absurd. "You cheated. You humiliated me. And now it's my fault." She shrugged. "I'm just saying, you pulled away too. Emotionally. You stopped showing up. I wanted to scream. Instead, I said, you're right. I stopped showing up because I had no idea I was auditioning for a part in a story you were already rewriting behind my back. She didn't respond, just looked at the ground like it somehow held better answers than I ever could. I'm not going to fight you anymore, I said. If this is what you want, go be with him. But don't stand here pretending this was some misstep. A mistake is a missed call. A wrong name. This was a campaign. She looked up at me with red eyes, but not tears. Frustration, maybe. Or regret. I'm not with him anymore, she whispered. He wasn't what I thought. He got weird. Possessive. I ended it. I almost laughed again. And you came back to me because what? I'm the safe option again. No, she said softly. I came back because I remembered who I was with you. That line, who I was with you, haunted me for days afterward. Because what she really meant was, I liked the version of myself I could control when you were around. And that wasn't love. That was performance. That was ego. And for the first time in 11 years, I realized I was done being someone else's emotional storage unit. 3 days after our parking lot confrontation, just as I was beginning to settle into the quiet numbness that follows devastation, my phone rang. I didn't recognize the number at first, but I picked up. Maybe a part of me wanted it to be her again, offering more pieces of her broken apology puzzle. But it wasn't Charmaine. It was her mother. Milton, honey, she said, her voice trembling. Do you have a moment to talk? I sat down, unsure what this could possibly be about. Her mom, Eloise, had always been polite with me, warm even. But we weren't exactly close. She'd been more involved in Charmaine's business world than in her personal one, and usually kept her opinions to herself. What's going on? I asked cautiously. There was a pause, like she was debating whether to go through with whatever she had planned to say. Then she exhaled sharply and said, I'm sorry, but I can't stay quiet anymore. I thought she'd come clean, but she hasn't. And you don't deserve to be left in the dark like this. I froze. Come clean about what? She didn't just end things with that Cam guy, Eloise said. He dumped her. Badly. Threatened to leak photos, texts, said he'd ruin her business if she didn't pay him to disappear. My stomach dropped. Photos. She was stupid, Milton. I begged her not to send anything to him, but she always thought she was invincible. That people would forgive her just because she bakes nice cupcakes and smiles big for Instagram. I stood up, pacing now. Why are you telling me this? Because she's rewriting history. Again. She's telling people you left because you were emotionally unstable, that you couldn't handle her success, that you were jealous. And I know that's not true. I've seen what you put into that marriage. She's not the same girl anymore. Not the one who brought you to Christmas dinner 10 years ago with shaking hands and eyes full of love. I don't know what happened to her, but I hate what she's doing to you now. I didn't know what to say. My mouth went dry. My own mother-in-law was giving me the truth that my own wife hadn't had the decency to say aloud. And worse, she was confirming something I hadn't even dared to believe. That the manipulation went beyond the affair. That even after being caught, Charmaine had chosen to bury the truth in a smokescreen of polished lies. She asked me to lie too, Eloise continued. Told me to play along. Told me to say you were depressed and distant. That she tried everything. But I can't. I'm not going to be part of that narrative. I sat back down, hand over my mouth. All I could whisper was, thank you. I don't know if you two can fix anything, she said gently. But please don't lose yourself in trying. She made her choices. You don't have to carry them on your back. After the call ended, I sat in silence for nearly an hour. I stared at the wall, the sunlight moving slowly across the floor, and realized I wasn't just grieving a relationship. I was grieving who I had been inside of it. The man who overlooked red flags because he loved too hard. The man who took the blame just to keep the peace. The man who thought that loyalty meant enduring whatever pain came attached. But loyalty isn't blind. It shouldn't be. And now that the curtain had been pulled back, I saw everything differently. The party wasn't the beginning of the end. It was the final act of a play I hadn't even known I was in. And maybe, just maybe, what came next wouldn't be about saving a marriage, but about saving myself. After Eloise's call, something shifted in me. Not suddenly, not dramatically, but gradually, like a fog lifting inch by inch off a field in the early morning. I didn't feel stronger. I didn't feel healed. But I felt awake. And that was enough to act. I drove home that night, not to see her, but to get my things. Real things. The ones I hadn't packed before. My journals. My grandfather's watch. A photo album she hadn't bothered to move from the living room shelf. I didn't know what she expected, that I'd come crawling back after a week or two. That we'd sit down, split a bottle of wine, and pretend none of this happened? She wasn't home. And somehow, that was a relief. But I didn't leave quietly. I left something behind. I sat at the kitchen table and wrote a short note. Not emotional. Not angry. Just honest. I know what happened. I know about Cam. I know what you told your mother to say. I know what you're telling everyone else. Keep your stories. I'm done being a part of them. Then I walked through each room and took one last look, not because I missed any of it, but because I needed to remind myself why I was leaving. The couch where we used to fall asleep watching documentaries. The mirror where she used to take selfies and turn away when I tried to kiss her from behind. The fridge door still plastered with fake smiles and magnets from places we never visited together. Before I closed the door, I felt something I hadn't expected to feel. Peace. I didn't slam it. I didn't hesitate. I simply left. And I didn't look back. It had been nearly 4 months since I walked out of that house, since I'd last heard her voice or seen her name on my phone screen. The silence wasn't heavy anymore. It was quiet in the right kind of way. I had moved into a small rental by the lake, nothing fancy, but it had big windows and no memories clinging to the walls. I'd even started writing again, not about her, not directly, but about the hollow places people leave behind and how we slowly learn to fill them with something better. One Saturday morning in early spring, I decided to take my coffee at a little cafe in town. I hadn't been there in years. The place had changed, brighter now, more open. And as fate would have it, as I was reading a book and sipping from a chipped mug, I heard a voice behind me say my name. I turned around. It was her. Charmaine looked different. Thinner. More careful in the way she held herself. Her confidence wasn't gone, but it had cracks in it now. She smiled weakly, almost like she expected me to get up and walk away. But I didn't. I nodded and gestured for her to sit. Just for a moment. We didn't talk about Cam, or the party, or her lies. She asked how I was. I told her the truth. I was better. Lighter. Not entirely whole, but working on it. She nodded like she understood. Maybe she did. Maybe she didn't. Then she said something I didn't expect. I've been in therapy, she said, trying to understand what I broke. In you, and myself. I looked at her for a long moment. I didn't feel anger anymore. Just distance. The kind of space that lets you breathe again. I hope you find what you're looking for, I said. Really? She smiled, and for once, it didn't feel rehearsed. She thanked me, then left. That was it. No drama. No lingering looks. No open doors. Just two people who used to love each other, finally speaking from a place that didn't ache anymore. As I sat there alone again, I didn't feel empty. I felt calm. I thought about all the days I'd wasted trying to hold something together that had already collapsed. And then I looked outside, at the sunlight on the sidewalk, and smiled to myself for the first time in a very long while. Because sometimes closure isn't about getting the apology. Sometimes it's just about no longer needing it.